Most of you are already finished. You just don't have the courage to admit it. You walk around pretending you're trying, pretending you're figuring things out. But the truth is simple and brutal. You're avoiding suffering. And if you avoid suffering, you don't get a neutral outcome. There is no safe middle ground. You don't get comfort. You don't get peace. You get erased. You either suffer or you perish. There is no third option. You've been lied to your entire life. They told you growth is balanced, that success is gentle, that you can ease your way into greatness. That's garbage. Growth is violent. Transformation is painful. And the reason you're stuck is because you're still negotiating with pain like it's optional. It's not optional. It's the price of entry. You either pay it willingly or life collects it from you with interest. Let me break something down that weak people will never understand. Speaking in tongues isn't some mystical nonsense. It's what happens when a man rewires his identity so deeply that his old self can't even recognize him anymore. It's when your internal language changes, when your thoughts stop sounding like excuses and start sounding like commands, when your mind no longer whispers comfort but demands execution. That's power. That's transformation. That's when you stop being average, because the average man speaks the language of weakness. I'm tired. I'll start tomorrow. I need motivation. That's your tongue. That's your identity. And as long as you speak like that, you'll live like that soft, replaceable, forgettable. But the moment you change that internal language, when your mind starts saying, do it anyway, push harder, no excuses, you've crossed a line most people will never even see. Discipline isn't something you do. It's something you become. And becoming requires destruction. You don't upgrade your old self. You kill it. You burn it down. You replace it with something sharper, colder, more controlled. That's why it hurts. That's why it feels unnatural. Because you're not evolving, you're transforming. And transformation is war. Weak men run from that war. They distract themselves, numb themselves, convince themselves that comfort is enough. But comfort is a slow death. It's not peace, it's decay. Every day you choose comfort, you're choosing to disappear. Every excuse you make is another step toward being irrelevant. And the world does not respect irrelevant men. Power comes from control. Control over your body, your mind, your habits, your reactions. And you don't gain control by doing what's easy. You gain it by doing what's hard, repeatedly, without emotion. That's the difference between a man who dominates and a man who gets dominated. One obeys his feelings. The other commands them. You want confidence? Earn it through suffering. You want respect? Build it through discipline. You want power? Take it through control. There's no shortcut. There's no hack. There's no secret. The truth is right in front of you, and you've been too weak to accept it. So here's the reality you need to face. Nobody is coming to save you. Nobody cares about your potential. Nobody rewards your intentions. You are judged by what you do, and what you do is determined by what you're willing to endure. You keep telling yourself that life will get easier if you just wait long enough, plan carefully enough, or avoid discomfort long enough. That belief is exactly what's keeping you stuck. Pain is not a disruption to your path. It is the path. Every man who has built anything real, anything respected, anything powerful, has paid for it in discomfort, sacrifice, and pressure. There is no version of success where you escape that cost. The only variable is whether you choose how you pay it. Right now, you are already paying. You feel frustration, stagnation, doubt, and quiet insecurity. That's not random. That's the price of avoidance. When you delay effort, when you hesitate, when you choose ease over action, the cost doesn't disappear, it compounds. It shows up as lost time, missed opportunities, and a growing gap between who you are and who you could be. That gap is painful, and the longer you ignore it, the heavier it becomes. Most people misunderstand pain because they associate it with loss, failure, or punishment. That's a weak interpretation. Pain is feedback. Pain is pressure shaping you into something stronger, more capable, more controlled. When you lift heavier weight, your muscles tear and rebuild. When you push your limits mentally, your tolerance expands. The discomfort you feel is not damage, it's construction, but only if you face it directly. If you run from it, it becomes decay instead. Look closely at your daily decisions. Every moment presents a choice. Take the harder path that builds you, or the easier path that weakens you. Wake up early or stay in bed. Train your body or scroll endlessly. Focus on your work or distract yourself. These are small decisions, but they are not insignificant. They are transactions. Every time you choose discomfort with purpose, you are investing in strength. Every time you choose comfort, you are paying in weakness. The problem is that comfort feels safe in the moment. It gives you immediate relief, immediate satisfaction, immediate escape. But that relief is temporary, and the cost is delayed. Pain works the opposite way. It demands effort now, discipline now, pressure now, but it pays you back later with confidence, capability, and control. Weak men chase immediate relief. Strong men invest in delayed power. You don't become resilient by thinking about resilience. You become resilient by enduring what most people avoid, by showing up when you don't feel like it, by pushing when your body tells you to stop, by continuing when your mind looks for exits. That is where identity is forged. Not in comfort, not in ease, not in convenience, but in resistance. There is also a level most people never reach, because they never stay in the process long enough. At first, pain feels like something you have to tolerate. Then, with repetition, it becomes something you accept. Eventually, it becomes something you use. You start to recognize it as a signal that you are on the right path. While others see difficulty and step back, you see it and step forward. That shift changes everything. It separates those who survive from those who dominate. If you think you can bypass this, you're wrong. If you think you can negotiate with it, you're wrong. Life does not reward intention, it rewards endurance. It does not care about your plans, it responds to your actions. You either step into the pressure and shape yourself into something formidable, or you avoid it and get shaped by circumstances into something forgettable. Pay attention to the voice in your head, because that voice is not neutral. It is programming your identity in real time. Most people think their thoughts are random, harmless, or temporary. They're not. The way you speak to yourself is shaping your actions, and your actions are defining your results. If your internal language is weak, your life will reflect that weakness with absolute precision. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your internal standards. And those standards are built from the sentences you repeat in your mind every single day. I'll do it later. I'm not ready. I need to feel motivated first. These aren't just thoughts, they are commands. And every time you repeat them, you reinforce a version of yourself that hesitates, delays, and avoids pressure. That's not a coincidence. That's conditioning. Most men are not in control of their own mind. They are reacting to it. Their thoughts dictate their behavior, and their behavior creates a cycle they don't understand how to break. They wait until they feel confident before they act, not realizing that confidence is built after action, not before it. They wait until they feel ready, not realizing that readiness is a byproduct of doing hard things repeatedly. They are trapped, not because they lack ability, but because their internal language is designed for comfort instead of performance. Now understand this clearly. The language you use internally must shift from passive to commanding. There is a fundamental difference between thinking, I should train today, and I train today. One is optional. The other is non-negotiable. One leaves room for excuses. The other eliminates them entirely. This is not about motivation, this is about authority. The moment your inner voice becomes directive instead of suggestive, your behavior starts to align without resistance. High-level performers don't rely on feelings because they train their internal dialogue to override them. When their mind says, you're tired, they respond with irrelevant. When it says, this is difficult, they respond with continue. That is control. That is discipline at the cognitive level. It's not visible from the outside, but it determines everything on the inside. The dangerous part is that most people don't even notice how weak their internal language is. It sounds normal to them because they've been repeating it for years. But normal is exactly the problem. Normal thinking produces average results. If you want something above average, your thinking has to be structured differently, sharper, stricter, more demanding. You have to speak to yourself in a way that leaves no room for negotiation. There is also a deeper shift that happens when you take control of your internal voice. You stop identifying with your impulses and start directing them. Instead of saying, I don't feel like working, you recognize that feeling as irrelevant noise. Instead of debating with yourself, you issue instructions. That transition from reacting to commanding is where identity changes. You are no longer a man who hopes to improve. You are a man who executes, regardless of circumstances. This is where most people fail. They underestimate how much power their internal dialogue holds. They focus on external strategies, routines, and plans, but ignore the operating system running everything. If that system is built on excuses, hesitation, and emotional dependence, nothing else will hold. But if that system is built on clarity, command, and consistency, everything else becomes easier to execute. Your mind is either your greatest weapon or your biggest liability. There is no neutral state. Every thought is either reinforcing strength or reinforcing weakness. And the longer you allow weak language to dominate your thinking, the more difficult it becomes to break out of it. But once you flip it, once your internal voice becomes sharp, controlled, and directive, you stop negotiating with life and start imposing your will on it. You're waiting to feel ready. And that's exactly why you're falling behind. The belief that you need the right mood, the right energy, or the right moment before you act is one of the most damaging lies you can operate under. Feelings are unstable. They shift constantly, influenced by sleep, environment, stress, and distraction. If your output depends on something that's unpredictable, your performance will always be inconsistent. Look at your own patterns. On the days you feel motivated, you move fast, you push harder, you think clearly. But those days are rare and they don't last. The moment that feeling fades, so does your effort. That's not discipline, that's dependency. And dependency is weakness no matter how you try to justify it. You are placing control of your actions in the hands of something you cannot manage. Discipline operates differently. It removes emotion from the equation. It doesn't ask how you feel. It defines what you do. When discipline is in place, your behavior becomes predictable, repeatable, and consistent. You train because it's scheduled, not because you feel like it. You work because it's required, not because you're inspired. That level of structure is what separates people who occasionally perform from those who always perform. Most people avoid discipline because it feels restrictive. They think it limits freedom when in reality it creates it. When you rely on feelings, you are controlled by them. When you rely on discipline, you control your actions, regardless of those feelings. That's real freedom, the ability to execute under any condition, without hesitation, without negotiation. There's a critical shift that happens when you commit to discipline fully. You stop asking yourself whether you will do something and start deciding how well you will do it. The decision to act is already made. There is no internal debate, no delay, no wasted energy. All your focus goes into execution. That efficiency compounds over time. Small, consistent actions performed daily will outperform bursts of motivation every single time. You also build something far more valuable than results. You build trust in yourself. Every time you follow through despite discomfort, you reinforce a standard. You prove to yourself that your word has weight, that your decisions are final. That internal trust becomes a foundation. It removes doubt, reduces hesitation, and increases speed. You no longer question whether you can handle pressure. You know you can because you've done it repeatedly. Understand how dangerous inconsistency is. It doesn't just slow your progress, it erodes your confidence. When you start and stop, when you push hard one day and disappear the next, you create instability in your own identity. You become someone who cannot rely on himself. And once that belief sets in, everything becomes harder, every task feels heavier, every challenge feels bigger because you don't trust your own follow-through. Discipline eliminates that instability. It creates a rhythm that doesn't depend on circumstances. Whether you're tired, distracted, or under pressure, the standard remains the same. You show up, you execute, you complete the task. Over time, this becomes automatic. You don't need to convince yourself anymore. You don't need external pressure. The system runs on its own. There will be resistance. There will be moments where your mind looks for an exit, where your body pushes back, where everything in you suggests stopping. That's where discipline proves its value. Not when it's easy, not when you're energized, but when you're at your lowest and still move forward. That's the point where most people break, and the exact point where you separate yourself. If your success depends on motivation, you've already limited your potential. Motivation is temporary, unreliable, and weak under pressure. Discipline is permanent, stable, and built to withstand pressure. One fades when challenged, the other gets stronger. Comfort feels harmless, almost deserved. You tell yourself you've earned a break, that easing off for a day won't matter, that you'll push harder tomorrow. That's how it begins. Quiet, reasonable, almost logical. But what you don't see is how quickly comfort turns from a reward into a habit, and from a habit into a default. The moment comfort becomes your standard, progress stops being automatic and starts becoming optional. You are not designed to grow in ease. Growth demands tension, resistance, and pressure. Without those forces, nothing changes. Your body doesn't get stronger without strain. Your mind doesn't get sharper without challenge. Your skills don't improve without repetition under difficulty. Comfort removes all of that. It creates an environment where you stay the same, and staying the same for too long is not stability, it's decline. The danger is subtle because comfort doesn't feel like failure. It feels like relief. It gives you a sense of safety, a temporary escape from effort and responsibility. But that relief comes at a cost you don't immediately notice. Every time you choose the easier path, you weaken your tolerance for discomfort. Tasks that once felt manageable start to feel difficult. Challenges you could have handled become overwhelming. You're not just standing still, you're becoming less capable. Look at the long-term effect. A man who repeatedly chooses comfort loses his edge. His discipline fades. His focus weakens. His standards drop. He becomes reactive instead of proactive, waiting for external pressure to force him into action. By the time he realizes what's happening, he's already behind. And catching up is far more painful than maintaining momentum would have been. Comfort also distorts your perception. It convinces you that you're doing enough when you're not. It lowers the bar without you noticing. You start comparing yourself to average instead of to your potential. You start accepting results that once would have been unacceptable. That shift is dangerous because it doesn't feel like failure. It feels like normal. And once mediocrity feels normal, breaking out of it becomes significantly harder. There's another layer most people ignore. Comfort doesn't just affect your actions, it affects your identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who avoids difficulty, someone who hesitates under pressure, someone who looks for the easiest route. That identity reinforces your behavior. You don't just choose comfort occasionally, you become someone who defaults to it. And once that identity is established, every decision becomes predictable. High performers operate differently. They don't chase comfort, they use it strategically. Rest is controlled, intentional, and limited. It serves a purpose. It does not become a lifestyle. The majority of their time is spent in environments that demand effort, focus, and execution. They understand that staying sharp requires constant exposure to challenge. The moment they feel too comfortable, they increase the difficulty. This is where most people fail. They treat comfort as something harmless, something they can indulge in without consequences. But comfort compounds, just like discipline does. Small decisions repeated daily create a trajectory. If those decisions lean toward ease, your trajectory moves downward, even if it's slow. And slow decline is the most dangerous kind because it goes unnoticed until the gap is too large to ignore. You have to become aware of how often you choose comfort and why. Is it because you're tired or because you've trained yourself to avoid effort? Is it because you need recovery or because you lack discipline? There's a difference, and most people blur that line to justify inaction. Real control comes from recognizing when comfort is necessary and when it is destructive. The reality is simple. Comfort does not build anything valuable. It maintains, and over time it erodes. If you want to grow, you have to move toward what challenges you, not away from it. You have to choose the path that demands more, not less. Because every time you choose comfort over effort, you're trading long-term strength for short-term relief. You keep trying to improve the same version of yourself that created your current problems, and that's the flaw. You're adjusting habits, tweaking routines, setting new goals, but the core identity underneath remains unchanged. And as long as that identity stays the same, your results will always drift back to where they started. You don't rise above your identity. You operate within it. The idea that you can fix yourself is comforting, but it's misleading. Fixing implies that the structure is sound and only needs minor adjustments. That's rarely the case. If your patterns are built on inconsistency, avoidance, and emotional decision-making, then improving those patterns isn't enough. They need to be replaced entirely. That requires something most people avoid letting go of: who they currently are. Identity is not just how you see yourself, it's how you behave under pressure. It's the default setting that activates when things get difficult. You might set ambitious goals when you feel motivated, but when pressure hits, you fall back to your identity. If that identity is weak, undisciplined, or reactive, your actions will reflect it instantly. That's why temporary bursts of effort never last. They are built on a foundation that cannot support them. Real change begins when you stop negotiating with your current self and start challenging it directly. You have to look at your habits, your standards, your reactions, and ask a simple question. Would the man I want to become tolerate this? If the answer is no, then it has to go. Not gradually, not eventually, immediately. Because every time you tolerate a behavior that contradicts your future identity, you reinforce the version of yourself you're trying to leave behind. This process is uncomfortable because it forces you to confront the gap between who you are and who you claim you want to be. Most people avoid that confrontation. They distract themselves. delay action, or lower their expectations to match their current behavior. That's easier than changing, but it also guarantees that nothing meaningful happens. You stay in a loop aware of your potential, but unable to reach it. Replacing your identity requires consistency at a level most people never reach. You don't act differently once or twice. You act differently every single day, especially when it's inconvenient. You show up when you don't feel like it. You follow through when it would be easier to stop. You maintain standards when no one is watching. Over time, those actions stop feeling forced. They become automatic. That's when identity shifts. There's a critical moment in this process where your old self starts to lose control. The habits that once felt natural begin to feel uncomfortable. The excuses that once sounded reasonable start to sound weak. That's not confusion, that's progress. It means the new identity is taking over. But this is also where most people relapse, because the transition feels unstable. They revert to what's familiar instead of pushing through to what's better. You cannot afford that hesitation. The longer you stay in between identities, the more friction you create. You're neither fully disciplined nor fully comfortable, which leads to inconsistency. The only way forward is to commit completely. Decide who you are becoming and align every action with that decision. No exceptions, no compromises. High-level individuals don't debate their standards. They enforce them. They don't question whether they should act. They execute based on who they've decided to be. That level of clarity removes hesitation. It eliminates internal conflict. You're not asking yourself what to do in each situation. You already know, because your identity dictates it. The version of you that hesitates, avoids, and settles will not take you where you want to go. It's not capable of it. Holding on to it while expecting different results is unrealistic. At some point, you have to make a clean break. You have to stop identifying with your past behavior and start defining yourself by your current actions. Because in the end, you are not what you intend to do. You are what you repeatedly do. And if what you repeatedly do doesn't match the man you claim to be building, then that man does not exist yet. Control is not a personality trait. It's a decision that shows up in your actions every single day. And right now, whether you admit it or not, something else is controlling you. It might be your impulses, your habits, your environment, or your emotions. But if you're not deliberately directing your behavior, you are being directed. There is no neutral position. You are either in control or you are being controlled. Look at your day with honesty. How much of it is intentional and how much of it is reactive? Do you decide what you do, or do you respond to whatever appears in front of you? Notifications, distractions, moods, external pressure, these things pull you in different directions, and if you don't have a system of control in place, they will dictate your actions without resistance. That's how most people live, not by design, but by default. The problem with living reactively is that it creates inconsistency. Your output changes based on your environment. If things are calm, you perform. If things are chaotic, you slow down. If you feel good, you push forward. If you don't, you stop. That variability makes it impossible to build anything substantial. High performance requires stability, and stability comes from control. Control starts with awareness. You need to recognize what is influencing your decisions. Every habit you have, good or bad, exists because it has been repeated enough times to become automatic. You don't think about it anymore, you just do it. That's efficient, but it's also dangerous if those habits are working against you. Automatic behavior without intentional direction leads to predictable outcomes. And if those outcomes are not where you want to be, the system needs to change. Once you identify those patterns, the next step is interruption. You cannot let automatic responses run unchecked. When the impulse to delay shows up, you act immediately. When the urge to avoid difficulty appears, you move toward it instead. This is not about comfort or preference. It's about authority. You are overriding a pattern that has been controlling you and replacing it with a deliberate action. There is resistance in this process. Your mind will look for reasons to maintain the current state because it is familiar. Familiar feels safe, even when it is limiting. That's why control requires effort at the beginning. You're going against patterns that have been reinforced over time. But with repetition, those new actions become the default. What once required effort becomes automatic, and the system starts working in your favor instead of against you. Environment plays a critical role in this. If your surroundings are filled with distractions, weak influences, and low standards, maintaining control becomes significantly harder. You are constantly fighting against external pressure. Strong individuals don't rely on willpower alone. They design their environment to support their objectives. They remove unnecessary distractions, structure their time, and place themselves in situations that demand performance. Another aspect of control is emotional regulation. If your emotions dictate your actions, you are not in control. Feeling tired, frustrated, or unmotivated is normal. Acting based on those feelings is optional. The ability to separate what you feel from what you do is a defining characteristic of high-level performance. You acknowledge the emotion, but you do not allow it to interfere with execution. Decision-making also becomes sharper under control. You waste less time debating, less time hesitating, less time second-guessing. Your standards are clear, your priorities are defined, and your actions align with them. That clarity increases speed and reduces friction. You move forward at the engine that drive you full of mediocrity. And let me tell you something, most people do. If you are not actively controlling your habits, your time, and your responses, something else will take that role. It might be social media, comfort, external expectations, or internal doubt. None of those will lead you where you want to go. They will keep you in a cycle of reaction, not progression. Control is not about perfection. It's about direction. It's about making sure that your actions are aligned with your goals, regardless of circumstances. Every time you choose to act deliberately instead of reactively, you reinforce that control. And over time, that reinforcement builds a system that operates with precision, consistency, and purpose. You either choose suffering now on your terms with purpose, with control, or you suffer later when life crushes you without mercy. But understand this clearly, suffering is guaranteed. The only choice you have is whether it builds you or destroys you. So stop hesitating, stop negotiating, stop pretending there's another path. There isn't. Suffer or perish.